Good evening and welcome. I will take this opportunity to begin our workshop this evening. Today is June 4th, 2025. This is the Scarborough Town Council's meeting with the Housing Alliance. In this open workshop format, we have our special guest from the Housing Alliance here this evening, and also, let the record show that the full council is here this evening. Before I kick it over to our Housing Alliance chair, I just want to kind of let the public know, the reason for this workshop as it relates to the 2025 goals that we adopted. And I'm just going to take a second to read the goal, which says, create a comprehensive and actionable, affordable, and workforce housing policy that recognizes the importance of growth zones, housing diversity, including multifamily and accessory dwelling units, and residents' concerns over the rate of growth. And so this is step one of working towards that goal for this year for us as a council. I want the community to know that there's ample time to provide input and that this is really just a starting place for our discussion. So with that, I will go ahead and turn it over to our guests for introductions, please.
Yeah, hi, I'm Bob Netto.
Karen Martin with Scarborough Economic Development Corporation.
I'm Brian Shumway.
G. Marie Caterina, here as a citizen.
Thank you very much and welcome. So at this point, I will turn it over to our Housing Alliance Chair, Brian Shumway.
Great. Thank you, Chair Seiler. Appreciate it. And thank you, everybody, for all councilors for coming tonight for the workshop. And thank you for everybody from the Alliance for coming tonight as well. And everybody from the public who's interested in the subject. So this is our first housing workshop, and it's the first that we've had in years, maybe the first ever. So thank you for hosting it, and thank you for whoever had the idea. This is super. And it's step one. And what I'm hoping tonight is to give a little bit of a snapshot of where we're at with housing in Scarborough, but more importantly, to lay a foundation of information regarding housing and this thing of housing policy. So Liam can go to the next slide and just kind of get it out on the table. It's complicated. Mm-hmm. These are a lot of the players that are involved in a typical deal or a typical transaction or getting housing built. And that's probably not all of them, but two of them are here tonight, right? One is the town council and one of them is the Housing Alliance. And we're two of many. One of them is the public, and so that's the one that sort of covers all of the municipal groups here. And so big picture, it's chess, it's not checkers, it's not easy. And Councilor Doherty, you mentioned earlier, God, this is complicated, and it absolutely is, right? So your intuition is spot on. The group here is part of what we call the Scarborough Housing Alliance. We're a community group that exists to help you as town council to establish a local housing agenda. We're a group of 6 citizens. We're all generally pretty long-standing citizens of town. Without aging anybody at this table or off this table, we've been around for a while. We've got bankers, we've got realtors, we've got someone who's co-founded a major regional investor in the low-income housing tax credit industry. We've got an interim president of a local housing nonprofit. I'm an affordable housing developer. We've got somebody who's very active in a lot of boards in town. We've got a really good representation of the community and people who are really well-versed in housing. And so we're here to help, and we're here for you. And so, the question at the end of the slide is how can we help? And I hope that you'll feel free to reach out to us so that we can do that. So tonight, here to establish a common language, establish a baseline of information. This seems very basic, but I'd like to, affirmatively define affordability. There's something that comes up in a lot of conversations that I'd hope to get past as a goal. We talk about affordable housing, and a lot of times the conversation will go, we're talking about affordable housing. Somebody will say, wow, that number sounds high. That sounds expensive. That can't be affordable. And so I'd like to leave this conversation tonight with an understanding that even though numbers sometimes sound big, there's a definition of what is affordable. And nowadays, big numbers are big, and that's kind of life. And we'll talk about that in some of the later slides, but there is an accepted definition of affordability. The numbers are big, and that's part of the problem that we're all here to solve together. And it's really kind of too bad. And that's our job, right? We'll talk about the cost of housing, we'll talk about affordability and attainability, and then we'll wrap the whole thing up. So a common language. If I'm up here talking about housing jargon and other people are here talking about what sounds like it makes sense, but doesn't quite meet what I'm talking about with housing jargon, we're likely to just talk past each other. And that doesn't get a lot done, right? So a common language and a common vocabulary is really key to us communicating effectively. We started the meeting off with a present to you guys, which is a one-page handout with some keywords that we use in the industry about housing policy and development issues. Hopefully you'll tuck it away, maybe laminate it. I don't know. But I hope it's useful. I hope it's useful in future meetings. I hope it's useful as you're thinking about housing policy at night before you're going to bed. And hopefully it helps to solve some problems in the future. We've got some keywords and phrases that I thought would be important to talk through out loud. Before I made this slide, I didn't look at this page to see that all of these keywords and phrases are actually on that page, and they're not. So we might skip over one or two of them, but one of them is AMI. And I think a lot of times you guys will hear people talk about 60% of AMI or 80% of AMI, and what the heck does that mean, right? AMI stands for area median income. And what does that mean, right? And so HUD, which is our national, it's our national housing administration. They define areas within the country. For us, it's the Portland area that we're a part of. And the median income is that income that half of the people in the area make more than, and half of the people in the area make less than. All right, so when we talk about area median income, that's the number. And so then it's generally published for a household of 4 people. And there's tables that are published for households of different size people, depending upon how you use it. But when people are talking about AMI, they're talking about some percentage of that number where half the people make more, half the people make less, and that would be 100% of AMI. And then we kind of scale from there. Cost of housing sounds pretty intuitive. What does it cost to live in a house? But it's a pretty defined phrase as well. And when we talk about cost of housing, we're talking in 2 contexts. One, for renting, we talk about the cost of your rent and the cost of your utilities that you have to pay for. It doesn't include, the cost of things that are optional, right? So it doesn't include, these days we count internet as optional and we count telephone as optional, but the cost of the utilities that you're required to pay. In the home ownership context, it's your principal and your interest on your mortgage, your homeowners, your HOA fees, your insurance, and your taxes. And those are all considered your cost of housing. We care about that because one of the big things in this affordable housing industry, in this affordable housing world, is whether somebody's cost burdened or not. And that's what we're really trying to prevent, is somebody spending more than feels like too much on their housing. And when somebody's spending more than 30% of their income, we say that they're cost burdened. If they're spending more than 30% of their income on their cost of housing, we say they're cost burdened, and we say that their housing is not affordable. And so that's where the definition of affordability comes in. And that's 30% of what we would call their gross income, right? So their top line income. And so I don't know if we still have, I don't think we have it in the slideshow anymore, but we've a couple versions of the slideshow ago. We had kind of what a budget might look like if you're making X dollars and where all that money goes, and you can think of probably 20 to 30% going towards taxes, 20 to 30% going towards housing, and then what's the rest of your money go towards, and it evaporates pretty quickly. And it's pretty sad. It goes pretty quick. So affordable means housing's not cost burdensome to you. And unaffordable means it is. And we really strive to create an affordable situation. This notion of attainability, which is the next important keyword, really straddles to when we get to talk about home ownership. And so if we've got a situation where we've created an affordable opportunity for somebody, and we'll talk about this later. So we've got taxes that are affordable. We've got HOA fees that are affordable. We've got a mortgage payment that's affordable, and we're feeling great about it. So we've done good policy work. And to buy the house that creates that situation requires $120,000 down payment. We say that housing opportunity is not attainable. And so it's almost like theoretical affordability, right? And so we'll talk about that a little bit later too, but that's an important phrase. And so affordable housing, getting back to AMI, is generally housing that's targeted to people who are, so it's housing that's affordable, right? So it's not going to create a cost burden to somebody. For people who are earning 60% of AMI or less. And then workforce housing is housing that's is affordable, so it's not cost burdensome to people who are earning 120% of AMI or less. So these are kind of the key. If you understand these phrases, or if you put stars on the page, that'll, I think, help a lot.
Brian, I just want to be clear, you mentioned in the context of affordable housing, it was 60% of the AMI. I believe our definition is 80%.
Is that right? Okay.
Yes,
Yeah,
Okay,
just want to be clear.
great.
If I could briefly comment, I think that actually gets to a point that is important that does come up, is that a lot of these definitions come from the housing finance programs, because they're the ones, those programs tend to be what drive projects and whether they're viable or not. So when you're kind of in the affordable housing world, that is sort of how you tend to think about what is affordable. It's 60% of AMI, because that's the sort of the baseline long-term housing tax credit or LIHTC affordability benchmark. But there are sometimes discrepancies between those definitions and what individual municipalities may have.
That's right.
Yeah, to that point, most of the big projects we see are reaching 60% or better.
Right.
But our definition in our zoning ordinance is 80%.
Okay. So here's just a snapshot of Scarborough, just to kind of lay the foundation. And Karen, you really did a great job digging up the data for this. And you just kind of level set here. We've got about almost 24,000 people, almost 12,000 housing units, or 11 and a half, depending upon what data source you look at. A little less than 1,000 condo units, and 10,500 households. So what does that tell us, right? Some people own more than one house here, or maybe some people are using houses to rent out on the beach or something. So not everybody's living in the house that they own. We see that about a quarter of our households are renters. Of the rentals, and I think this is really important to know, and it's really it's not intuitive, it's not counterintuitive, but more than 20% of the rentals in town are single family homes. So when we're driving around and we're seeing these new tall buildings getting built, and oh my goodness, look at all the renters that are coming to town, they're already here, right? Already living in the neighborhoods. And And when we're driving around town, looking at all these tall buildings being built in town, saying, oh my goodness, look at all the renters. Not all of the tall buildings are rentals, right? Some of them are condos.
Mm.
So you kind of the headline on that is you can't judge a book by its cover, right? Even when it's a building. So this was really interesting data that came from a bunch of interesting data sources.
ACS, American Community Survey.
One interesting data source. All right. All right. So we talked about AMI and we talked about percentages of AMI. And I don't know about you guys, but when I hear percentages of AMI, I've been doing this for 24 years and it, you know, with like all due respect to AMI, it's a little bit meaningless to me. Because when I think of like incomes, I think of dollars, right? So we wanted to share this to make it a little bit more real. Like what is 80% of AMI and what is 120% of AMI? And this is what it is in Scarborough, right? So when we're talking about somebody making 80% of AMI, it's somebody who's making $72,000 a year. Or a household that's making $103,000 a year. And we're talking, when we're talking 120% of AMI, the rubber hits the road with, if it's a one-person household, it's somebody making $109,000 a year. Or a four-person household, that's, you know, between all, you know, all the income earners in the house making $155,000 a year. So sometimes when we talk and we do presentations, we talk about a lot of percentages and a lot of acronyms and I don't know, maybe those resonate with you guys, but I think sometimes seeing the dollar signs feels a little more connected to the paychecks that we all get. And so this is what it's like in real life. And then this is what it's like with real jobs.
Mm.
So Karen did a great job. I don't know, was this multiple data sources or was this just one interesting data source?
Maine
All right.
Department of Labor.
All right, so just one interesting data source for this one too. But Karen went through it and picked some kind of regular jobs that regular people have, and just to see what do these all add up to? And because again, when people are doing presentations to you guys, it's really common to say, well, we're doing affordable housing for the teacher and the fireman and the policeman and the waiter or the waitress. And it's kind of, you know, it's a little fuzzy sometimes. But here's how that all translates to dollars. And then what we did, we kind of went one step. So then we did a little relationship building and we kind of created some couples between the people who would be working in these jobs, or roommate situations. And we did some math with mortgages, assuming what made sense at this time, which was a 5.75% mortgage,
That's a low one.
which is a low one. And some assumptions about utilities and insurance. And we looked to see how much of a home these people could buy and it still be affordable to them,
Mm.
right? So not cost burdensome. And so you can see some of the numbers here. And so I don't know if any of you have, well, I guess all of you have paper and some of you have pens or pencils, but you know, either remember or just write down some of these numbers of like what kind of home these people would be able, these magical roommates could afford. Because we're gonna get into what's available for sale in town. And there's not a lot at these price points.
Mr. Chair, is this gonna be available?
I
so
think it's
people-
currently available.
Is it?
Yes.
Okay, I haven't had a chance to look.
Yes.
Cause it'd be great for people to print out some
Yeah.
of these pages, cause I
Yeah.
think this is impactful.
Yeah. So,
All right, just if I could, is there any level of down payment assumed in that?
10%.
10%?
yeah. Yep. So, and here's kind of one of the first punchlines. Unaffordable and unattainable housing has consequences, right? So it turns out 69% of Scarborough's public safety employees don't live in Scarborough.
Hmm.
And I don't know, Scarborough's a great place. I don't think it's because they don't want to. And I don't know why they don't, but here's a data point. And Karen, I don't know if you have any more data behind the data, but it's,
Sure. We, both the fire chief and the police chief were very helpful and went to their staff and figured out how many people live in Scarborough and not. So some of these people, obviously, they owned homes before and they've taken a new job. But for the new folks that are coming in, I think a starting firefighter is somewhere around 59,000 for the income, I think is what Rich said. So, we're looking at how do we work with those who are just getting ready to buy a house or really new? And I think it was surprising that in total, 69% lived outside.
yeah.
And I'm certain that those that do are probably 20-year veterans.
Yeah.
of our
Is that right?
Oh, yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Yep.
they've been here, they bought in a different.
Right.
So we've got some data, we look back in time to 2024. And just a snapshot there where, I don't know how many homes this is, but this is a lot of homes that sold. I might know on the next page, but
425 or so.
all right.
There's a little more than.
And so this is, this is sort of the spread of where homes are selling for in Scarborough. Turns out 34 of them sold for over $1 million in 2024. And if we go back to what would have been, affordable to our roommates that we constructed, there were some that looks like they were mostly condos that were selling, but there's a lot that weren't. And so I think that's meaningful.
And that is a mix of both condos and single family. It's not
Yeah. So the
exclusively
blue,
single
the
family.
blue is single family, and then the green is the condos, right?
Yes.
Yes.
So here's 200, so here's 248 homes sold throughout the year. And how they all, so this must be the data from that chart. And then 11% would have been affordable to residents in 2024. I've boxed those first three rows. Anybody kind of checking the math, I'll tell you that third row, not all of those are affordable. So 11% of 248 is not the sum of 9.2 and 2719, but yeah, it's the homes that are selling in Scarborough are the expensive ones predominantly. We did a deeper dive and we looked in the middle of March at the 13 most affordable 3-bedroom homes in town. And the exercise we did was to see, would they be affordable to somebody at 80% of AMI, and would they be affordable to somebody at 120% of AMI? And then, assuming this magical 5.75% mortgage, and a 10% down payment. And then we did this exercise to see how much more of a down payment people would need to make in order to make it affordable, right? So if you think, the way to create affordability is to just borrow less, but have a bigger down payment. And so you'll see the 13 most affordable homes, and we'll start here. None except the first one were affordable to 80% of AMI, without between $70,000 and $150,000 of additional down payment. We'll go to the next one. Then you'll see, continuing on for the remaining 13 most affordable conventional homes, you start really falling off to not being affordable to anybody within this income band. You see, there's a pretty big impact that we noticed of HOA fees getting in the way of affordability, which is kind of it's not surprising, but it wasn't something that was intuitive. It's the impact that HOA fees have on that affordability. And so, here are just some takeaways. Among those 13, one was affordable to people at 80% of AMI, and 9 were affordable to people at 120%. There were 22 other 3-bedroom homes for sale that ranged between $689,000 and $3 million. 16 of them were between $689,000 and $839,000, and 6 were selling for over $1 million. There were 28 homes that were 4-bedroom and larger, and 12 of those were priced at $1.2 million or higher, and the lowest was $575,000. Then you see, what it would take to make these homes affordable to buyers. And what this tells me is we've got a lack of housing supply. People are willing to pay more for housing here. But even with the housing supply we have, it's unattainable, right? And when you're trying to get into housing for the first time in a great community like Scarborough, if you don't have built up wealth yet, you need a place to live and gather that wealth and save that up. And that's the importance of rentals. There's this great data resource that is pretty new, and it's listed at the bottom corner of this slide. And I took these charts that you can't read the axes of from it. But what these are home ownership, owner cost burden charts over time. So one is the purple shows owner cost burden by income in 2018, and then the blue shows it in 2023. And the thing you see in that chart is in 2023, there's more homes at the lower end of the income scale and the higher end of the income scale with a higher cost burden. In the middle, there's actually a lower proportion of homes where people are cost burdened. If you look at the right side chart, this shows owner households by household income over time. And what you see here, what really sticks out is that bar on the right. What this is showing is in that $150,000 or more household income, that's the income band where we've got the most growth in Scarborough. And so unless everybody in Scarborough is getting giant raises or winning the lottery or something, that's where all our new population is coming from. That's who we're attracting. And that's who's probably buying those homes that are so heavily priced. So first graph is showing people are stretching their incomes at the higher end of the price scale. And so they're becoming cost burdened. And then, the second chart is showing that, our new homeowners are disproportionately high income. And so that's on the homeownership side. And, I'll say so that's on the homeownership side. So on to rental units. This is a snapshot of our rental market. Karen, I don't know how many data sources this took.
This is apartments.com.
Okay, so here's one, right?
Snapshot. About 87 units, I believe, were on the market at the time.
Okay. So here we go, right? It's not cheap to live here, right? And people are living here. I think we generally find there's a lack of supply of 3 bedrooms here. There's not big vacancy in town, right? And this next slide, which we'll get to, is going to deal with this phrase FMR, right? Which we hear people say FMR, people say fair market rent. And I don't know, April, if I were to put you on the spot, I would ask you, what does FMR mean or fair market rent? But I'm not going to do that because it would be a trick question. I'm not going to do that. But let's go to the next slide.
I was frantically checking my.
We didn't put that on there.
So FMR feels like it means average market rent, but it doesn't.
Mm-mm.
And it's super tricky that way. So FMR actually, so we're back to percentiles. We're back to, I don't know, it's like 8th grade or whatever, whenever they teach percentiles in those public schools. It's the 40th percentile of gross rents for the typical non-substandard rental unit occupied by recent movers in a local market.
It's mouthful.
Right? Right? So here's what that means. One, that's the rent including all the utilities. right? So we don't need to think about, are these rents, like, does that include the gas? Does that include the heat? It's also, you can realize that it's sort of a little bit of the lower end of the market, or it's not the top end of the market. It automatically excludes luxury housing. This non-substandard rental, automatically, by definition, is excluding public housing and seasonal rentals. So all of the beach rentals and, any subsidized rentals are excluded from this survey. And interestingly, for a town like Scarborough, units built in the last 2 years are also excluded from this definition. Which I think explains why there's such a big gap between what's, the average, Zillow or apartments.com rent and an FMR. And so that I think we can expect to be changing over time as our units age. It automatically includes tax and utility costs and recent moves only. And so the person who's been sitting in their apartment or living in their apartment for the past 10 years, and just having rent increases and answering the phone for this survey that somebody is asking, they're not included in the survey of this. And so it's important. So here's another hopeful takeaway from this. When somebody says FMR, fair market rent, if we can just train ourselves that that doesn't mean average market rent, that would be a big win for us all. That'd be great. So what's our situation here in Scarborough? Because we see all these tall buildings going up, and Karen, where's this coming from?
Sure.
This is a couple data sources, right?
It's multiple data
Multiple data
sources, and
sources.
some of them were conflicting, so we did our best to align everything. And these are apartments that are in like 5 units or more structures. So it's not the duplex or triplex or something like that. These are the larger apartments that we could track.
So we've got about a little over 2,000 in town. About a quarter of them are affordable. 17% are affordable and age restricted, which sadly, I think, does that mean 55 plus?
Yes.
All right. And 8% are affordable with no age restriction. And so, so that's interesting. And, as we talk about the cost of housing and, both on the for sale side and the rental side, and affordable housing, and so restricted housing, one of the things that tends to make it more expensive and less likely to occur is how hard it is to build, right? And so the harder it is to build something, the harder it is to do anything in life, like the less you're going to do it, right? And so, and the harder it is to do something, the more you're going to charge for it. And so, what we find is when we make things hard, people don't do it. And when we make things easy, people do more of it. And so I think what we found with the single family homes, we tend to make single family homes at the high end of the market easy to build. And we tend to make market rate rentals easier to build than affordable housing. And so that gets built. And so as we think about, future policy direction, if that's what we want, that's good. Let's keep doing what we're doing. If that's not what we want, we can maybe reconsider our approach to what's easy. Yeah.
I just want to point out that of all the affordable units, 68% of them have age restrictions. So, the apartments that were made for families and things like that, there's like 168 of them. So we're doing well. We're doing well on seniors, but we're not doing so well on non-age restricted.
Karen, do you have a sense of roughly what percentage of the multifamily units have been built within the last, like, relatively recently?
Ooh, I don't have that number, but there is a reasonably good chunk of brand new units. So I can find that for you.
Hey,
We can do
yes,
that.
we do, Karen,
Oh,
on the next slide.
we'd have to add them all up though.
Oh, we'd have to add them up, but.
Yes.
But if people want to do their own,
Individually.
if people want to do their own math, look at this, Karen.
I know.
You did
I know, yes.
Good question, Counselor Fellows. You're
Yeah.
a step ahead of us. So here is a snapshot of the multifamily housing we have in town. And some of it dates back to 1927. Well, I mean, that's not when the housing part was built, right? But
No, this one was built.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you get to see that some of the apartments really started back in the 70s. So there's the 70s and 80s. And then there was a little bit of a drought until the mid 2000 or early 2000s.
That was true throughout the region. There was a drought.
Yeah. And then, yeah, so you can see sort of the chronology of housing construction. And then one of the things that's also kind of interesting is, these are generally small chunks, right? Which is a reflection of how things get funded, at least on the subsidized side or the affordable side. So. All right, so yeah, so here's the snapshot of multifamily in town. So here's, we were talking about big numbers and what feels affordable and the definition of affordability. Here are the average rents from that previous chart. For each bedroom size, in order for this to be affordable, here's the income you'd need to make. If you make less than this income and you're trying to live in one of these apartments, those rents are not affordable. And I don't know, I don't have the, when we're all going through this slideshow on our own later, we can go back to our roommates and see how their incomes stack up against this, but these income looks pretty high to me for what it takes to be affordable. So here is a data summary for rentership coming from that same main state housing data portal. And the highlights here, cost burdening is the same for lower income renters as it was in 2018, but much worse for higher income renters. Which I think, is I don't know what that's a reflection of. I don't know if it's a reflection of our subsidized housing really being what's housing our lower income renters in town, and people stretching to live in Scarborough and in what we have. There's certainly more higher income households that are renting here than in 2018. And Councilor Fellows, I think you probably have hit the nail on the head with the fact that that's probably because we have more places to live in town that you can rent than we did in 2018. And then you'll maybe be able to see it when you print this out, but cost burdening is affecting everyone, but it's especially hitting seniors and households with children. It's single parent households are least affected out of all these groups, although still 30% of them are affected. So it's a fairly universal problem here in town. So here's the wrap up. And here are the takeaways before we get into conversation. So first, the jargon's confusing. It's not just you, right? Second, even with affordability, wealth is a barrier to affordable ownership, and wealth meaning down payments. Our change of supply of housing reflects all this. And then, finally, we're here to help. We're relatively talented. We're long-term members of the community. So we've been around for a few years, and we kind of represent different elements of the community as well. And we enjoy helping. So, with that, any questions?
I'm sure there are many questions. Thank you very much for providing so much information. For the benefit of the council and everyone in the room, there is this flyer that we've all been using to help us with the acronyms and some of the definitions. I would respectfully request that this also gets posted as part of the agenda packet, because I just think it's really fantastic. And so with that, I will turn it over for other counselor comments and questions if there's somebody who wants to kick us off. Yeah, Karen, go for it.
Thank you. A lot of data. I don't like data.
Yeah.
Consistent with what I do. I think for me, I have no perspective. So I have no perspective. I have no idea how the rest of the state of Maine is handling this. So I love the snapshot of Scarborough, but for me, I don't want to operate in a silo and go, this is where we're at. And I do feel generally like this pressure from the state to create housing. I personally feel like we have gone above and beyond that need.
Yeah.
Personally, just personally, that's how I feel. And so I am very curious how we would compare to similar sized municipalities, how they are handling this housing shortage and how we compare. Because for me personally, I feel like we've done a really good job and we are booming and our population is exploding and we have housing. And I know we don't have affordable housing, but I do feel like we have created a substantial amount of housing.
Yeah, I think I think we're doing great. Right, so we're creating great housing, and I think there's plenty of data to show how we compare to others. But I think your intuition is strong. And I think the question for us, and we've got big projects, right? So we've got big chunks of housing that are coming to the community. The question is where, if you think of, everything is a spectrum, right? If you think of where we're adding to our supply, I think that's where we really want to be thinking. And if we're going to put, some amount of housing into we're going to replace some housing that decays or whatever, and we're going to add some amount of housing each year. I think the question we want to ask ourselves as a community is, what reflects our values and what do we want to be adding and what do we want to make easy and what do we want to make hard? Do we want more $1 million homes coming up on whatever road in Scarborough? Or do we want to be promoting, more homes for people that, can't afford $1 million homes? Look, maybe there's answers that make sense for different reasons. Yes and no, but I think that's, I think you're right, is, we've provided a lot of housing and maybe others haven't. And, but it's kind of what kind of housing are we putting in? You saw some of that on the slides and,
I know
and is that what we want to keep doing?
Right. So I know there's a big need for senior housing, and of course I know that we need it, but I'm curious as to how our neighbors are handling
Yeah.
the same situation, because I personally feel this urgency and all this need, but then I also know what it costs.
Yeah.
And I'm just curious, is 10% a typical down payment? Like when I bought my house,
No.
I did not put 10% down. I put down like
No.
5 and 5.
Not anymore. Let me just.
And so I don't want to dive into the data points, but that was a big number over and over again. I'm like, I mean, my
Yeah.
first house, I think I put 20% down. My second house, not even 5.
Yeah.
So I think,
Right,
Yeah, so just quickly on that, the lower the down payment, the higher the mortgage payment, so the less affordable it would be.
no less chance you
Right.
have to buy anything.
Yeah.
The reality is that, and I'm gonna put on my Cumberland County hat for just a second, so bear with me. The county commissioners right now are working on, housing issues and trying to help some of the, outlying towns of the county, I will say, figure out how they're gonna address this issue, because quite frankly, it's an economic development issue. Because as more and more people come in and buy property, who are not from here, it's second houses, it's whatever. The workforce, the fishermen, the farmers, the waitresses, the people who work at the stores and whatever, don't have places to live, or they're pushed further and further and further out. So it's an economic development issue. I can tell you from my own experience as a real estate broker that I'll just tell you about my year so far, okay? Starting in January, I've done well this year. I have, 5 units either sold or under contract. 4 of them were all cash. All cash. One of them was $650,000, all cash. 2 of them were in Scarborough. One of them that was in Scarborough, was $485,000 cash. Every single, it was Scarborough, Little Sebago, Falmouth, Gorham, okay? Not one of these properties was purchased as a primary residence, not one of them. They're second homes or investments. So that's what I'm seeing myself personally, from folks. And one of the houses that I sold would have been a great first-time home buyer, fairly affordable home for someone, but got scooped up and it's gonna get turned into VRBO probably. So do something about STRs, please. But that's my opinion. We welcome yours. But just so you know, Scarborough, I don't know. I just believe in diversity in communities, that we want to welcome all sorts of people. And I hate to see Scarborough turning into people my age and older with lots of cash who want to be in a place like this because it's near the ocean and they live elsewhere other times of the year. And I don't know, that's a lot of what I'm seeing, and I'm not the only one in the real estate business seeing that, so.
Karen, if I could address the information on, you know, where we stand in the community. We are producing a lot of housing, way more comparatively speaking to other places. And I think one of the things we looked at, and there was a lot of information we could have put in here, and then we're trying to narrow it down to get to some you know, both emotional and factual data. We're trying to hit both of that. But I think what we're seeing is, hey, we're producing or attracting a fair amount of housing. We're diversifying our housing because we can look and say, you know, we've had a lot of multifamily units, a lot of apartments being built. So our total units are diversifying. And yet we can identify pockets where we're not doing well. So if that helps us focus, you know, we don't need to attract more, although more of a certain kind may be useful. We're doing fine on diversifying, but we still need to figure out a way to intervene in the market and deliver some units that can really serve these gaps that we have.
Yeah, John, go ahead. Thank
Yeah,
you.
I think that's my question that I'm trying to gather from the data. And to Karen's point, like from a volume of housing, we're doing well, but where are our gaps? Why are those the gaps and what do we need to do to close the gaps? And so I don't know if you guys can answer that today, but that's what I'm interested in understanding is getting like much more tactical into what are the areas, because even from a senior affordable perspective, we have been doing a lot of volume of senior affordable. So maybe we're pretty good there, but the workforce or the non-age restricted may be an area that we want to focus on if that's an opportunity. You know, Bill whispered over to me as we were looking through the data, like a lot of this doesn't look affordable for families to move to Scarborough, young families at least, to come and move here. And I think we're seeing that a lot in the data too, where the types of units that are being built aren't producing mass amounts of students at the school because they're probably priced pretty high because they're more market rate homes that are just hard for younger families to afford. So I'd be interested as we work through this to figure out like more specifically, you know, where we're not good and what it would take to get to good and what policies we would need to look at in order to do that. So I don't know, do you guys have thoughts on that? Like where you think we are that we may want to focus?
You know, one of the thoughts that comes to mind, the Alliance was looking at a project recently and there was a schedule that came out of how many meetings the sponsor needed to go to in order, how many meetings between all the different departments in town and all the different boards in town the sponsor had to go to in order to package the whole thing together in order to get to, you know, whatever subsidy they were going to use to build their affordable project. And I don't know if it was a page and a half or not, but it was at least a full page in like 14-point font or 12-point font. It was a lot and it was hard on a piece of land that if the sponsor had decided to put up the same number of market rate apartments, they probably could have just gone downstairs to the building department and filled out a piece of paper for a building permit. That is something that we really ought to look at addressing to see how we can, rebalance the number of pieces of paper that need to be filled
Yeah.
out. Because that makes it harder to do things that we want on.
But I think we can, I think we're narrowing the gap in terms of identifying where those pockets of market problems are.
Mhm.
So I think we can give you that. What the solutions are for that? That's a Housing Alliance and Council material, but I can funnel down for you. We show some of the gaps, but we could be more specific about the gaps. But it really is about affecting, how do you affect the rate that's being charged, either for selling or buying or renting?
The other thing that, and Bob, you might have seen some of this with the lending that you've done, but I think the more complicated things get, the fewer people wanna do it.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned it is easy and hard is hard. I mean,
Right.
as a layperson on the committee, and we all know this, it's hard for young families
Mhm.
to come into town. I mean, I have a starter home that I put up for sale. I can't believe what it's gonna sell for. And I have a hard time to believe that somebody's gonna be able to afford that, but that's the demand in the area. You got, the older people moving in, they're paying cash and want to have this lifestyle. Scarborough's a desirable place with, the beaches and that, and, prices, it's supply and demand. There's just so much demand. And how do you control prices?
Yeah.
How do you get developers and, to lower the prices and want to take less profit?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you guys think? Cause I know, and I might get this wrong, so Autumn or somebody might have to correct me, like, in our zoning ordinance, is it any new development, do we have a requirement of what percentage of new builds must be affordable before they pay in lieu fee, or is that just in the downs where we have that requirement?
Just the crossroads.
Okay. So I'm just curious, as we go forward, like, what are other communities doing? Do they say in any zone, the minimum is 10%? And again, is 10% too low? And is what we're putting in the in lieu fee, or the fee we're charging, too low, that any new development is just pay the fee, which isn't going to solve the problem, to allow them to build the market rate housing if we're trying to actually build? So I'm curious if our zoning and our in lieu fee thing needs to be, as we go forward, assessed and figure out like what makes sense there.
So the crossroads is the only place where we have the requirement, but we have managed to increase the funds available to the Housing Alliance for affordable housing through contract zones and through having payment in lieu of for public benefit. And then there are the density bonuses.
Density.
So
Yeah, this notion is referred to as exclusionary zoning, and you can see it right here. This concept is inclusionary zoning, and as was mentioned, the Crossroads District is the only one that requires, and in that case, it's 10% of all units must be affordable.
Mhm.
I don't believe that they even have the ability to pay an in lieu fee. They must actually
Right.
provide the units in that case.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The city of Portland is the one that is the most aggressive. They do have inclusionary zoning, citywide.
Mhm.
And that's been met with very limited success. In fact, most, because they have an in lieu option, and the development community has chosen to pay the fees as opposed to providing units. So anecdotally, and we can verify this, it really has not produced the sort of results that they intended. And this is about 10 years into that experiment for them.
Interesting.
I would be curious to know what their fees are.
One of the things that we found interesting that happens is there's a couple of ways to get extra density in town. And so there ends up being kind of like a price competitiveness between the different brands of density, if you will. And so that becomes a difficulty. And then when we're building housing, we kind of like the in lieu fees, but there's really only one way to do affordable housing these days, and that's with the low income housing tax credit. And so we kind of get those, we get those in lieu fees together usually. And And then we really rely on other things like a CEA and then this main state housing tax credit. And strong applicants and strong public support.
We really should minimize how important those in lieu fees have been. Those end up being really important pieces
Public
of the,
support.
what they call it, the capital stack,
Yeah.
for these projects. And so I think the Alliance, it's not a policy, but kind of the strategy has been to use these fees collected from others to partner with the professional affordable housing developers. And sometimes that grant money is the money that kind of puts it over the edge and makes the project viable. So
Can I
we've
ask
been
a-
able to leverage that quite well.
Is there a scenario where if we raise the in lieu fees to a certain amount and could build the fund, that we wouldn't need to also do CEAs on top of it? Like, I guess I'm trying to get at, I know there's like a financial gain for projects. If Scarborough is a very desirable community, people want to live here. If the community really wants more affordable housing options, if we charged a greater in lieu fee, could that help get the points that are required without having to do a CEA? I just don't know if there's like magic math. that
Yeah,
can be done.
Next.
the qualified application or
Like that.
allocation plan, the QAP, which is also defined term, through main housing, as I recall, specifically calls out credit enhancement agreements.
Yeah.
So that's not to say they look at this every year, they can change those requirements in point assignments, but right now CEAs are specifically called out and have as many as 3 points allocated.
Yeah.
Which often make the difference whether they
Okay.
get access to LIHTC or not.
Right, so to that point, John, like trying to figure out a side mechanism that we may be able to effectively use in Scarborough is not going to necessarily be universally applied to these applications and may actually end up being,
Hurtful.
yeah, hurtful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just the other point I'll just raise and why the in lieu fees have really came to the fore and really did come historically through the contract zone process. Whereas that was a scenario where we're meeting with someone that isn't required to do it. And we said, you need to provide public benefit and we'd like affordable housing as part of that. The reality is, developers, private developers who aren't in that business aren't good at it. It scares them. Frankly, we shouldn't encourage them. It's a whole different animal to own and operate and manage those kinds of units. So forcing a developer to build affordable units and manage them over 30 years may not be the best strategy. And that's why the in lieu fees have enabled us to partner with professional housing types that do this for a living.
Mhm. So the question that I think you said, Brian, that I think is super, super important that we have to explore as we go forward with this is what reflects our values and what do we want to be and what do we want to make easy and what do we want to make hard? I think that's kind of like
That's what I wrote down.
the key questions we need to answer with the public as well. Cause I'm with Jean Marie in that, like, what I value personally is diversity and, I don't want to see gentrification of Scarborough, but what I'm seeing in the data that you just shared is, I don't know if this is the warning sign or if we're already at the point of gentrification and it's hard to go back. And so that's kind of where I'm trying to wrap my head of like, where are we on that path? And are we at the path of it's going to be really hard to do what we want to do and we got to make some tough choices? Or are we at the point where we can turn things back and try and limit gentrification as much as we can?
Yeah,
Sorry.
I mean, I'm thinking that the horse is already running around the track a little bit,
Yeah.
right? It's out of the barn, running around the track. Get to invoke the downs a little bit, right? But I also think that this also tells me that, in some ways, we've got a little bit of a new community. Right? And so, any of the values that we think that we're planning to and that we think that we're like leading to, and I don't know how old our old Planapalooza things are and all of our kind of old, ways that we've invoked like listening to the community from the past are, but man, it seems like the community might be a little bit different now. And I don't know how hard it is to like re-invoke the community, but it'd be interesting to hear what today's community feels about, what's important to it.
That's a really good point, Brian, and I definitely want to continue to get that feedback just from the last 6 months or so, from public comment and things that people have said, things that people have said in emails to the council. The Marshview project spurred dozens and dozens of emails on the topic of affordable housing, and so these are kind of the 4 things that I captured that are being told to the council now that are values that people would like to see are preserving what makes Scarborough special, right? We hear that all the time. People who work here will be able to live here. Older residents will have options to age in place, and kids are able to go off and be successful and then have a place to move back to when they're ready. And so for me, those are really core principal values that I am going to be using to drive my decision-making. And so as we have this, kind of global conversation about all of Scarborough and whether or not we're too far down the track or whether or not we can pivot, the central idea that what are we making hard? And I don't want to talk past anybody. We have a lot of residents in the room who the reason that we had put so much process in place for affordable housing is because it is subsidized by the taxpayers. And so whenever we talk about those subsidies and whenever we are asking our taxpayers to commit something that they feel like is above and beyond, our taxes are already high enough. We hear all those narratives too. And so it's really hard to balance. I couldn't agree more. Why are we making affordable housing that much more of a process than it is for a developer to just go downstairs and fill out an application? That doesn't feel good. But then you have to layer in these pieces of how it impacts our community and our residents. And there was a reason that those extra pieces were put in place all those years ago. And so it's really challenging. As we said at the beginning of this is just the first step in the conversation. And so I think that this is incredibly valuable to be having. Corey.
Thanks. And apologies to everyone for my voice. Still have a whole council meeting to go after this. April, I think you did a good job of kind of recapping the recurring themes that we heard, particularly through Marshview recently. At the same time, we also saw comments like, if it's too expensive to live in Scarborough, live somewhere else, commute. That's what a lot of people have to do. And I can respect that opinion. I personally don't really subscribe to it. Some people do have to make choices, and many do, as we see from the data here with our public safety staff. But I think there are some inherent, there's an inherent cost to that, to the community. There's more traffic because people are commuting. There also are, there are investments that could be made in town that are going elsewhere. I also think, just kind of on building on this theme of what do we make easy, what do we make hard, and value judgments, which I think has been a really helpful way to frame things for me personally, that I think it's important to recognize and sort of step back a little bit. And when we look about what's easy right now, it's not easy because it's some inherent law of nature. It's easy in many cases because of policy decisions that have been made at the local, state, and federal level for a long time that have directly or indirectly supported, and in some cases directly subsidized, single-family ownership and development and ownership on large lots. And that's what we have a lot of in Scarborough, and what we've had historically. Obviously, as we've discussed, that's changed some over the last few years, but we still, to a large degree, have that framework. And there's nothing accidental about that. We also have IRS tax deductions for mortgage interest. Renters don't get a break on their taxes for paying rent. And so I think when we think, this sort of feeds into a broader theme that we see at the local and national level of sort of what's fair, who's deserving, who's not. I think it's helpful to just, sort of remind ourselves of that this framework that we've inherited, there's nothing necessarily inevitable about it. And so I think correspondingly, it's perfectly appropriate for us to be talking as a council and with the Housing Alliance about what are some policy measures that we can either continue to support or enhance or maybe change to maybe move the needle in the other direction, at least a little bit. I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with that. Others may disagree, but I do understand that there are a lot of concerns about growth and traffic. There's also the elephant in the room that has not been discussed yet tonight, which is, it's sort of been alluded to, I guess, but schools. And we hear that as well. And I guess I'd be curious to sort of pivot to more of a question. If there's anyone on the Alliance who'd like to speak to sort of, you know, their feelings about how we can have that conversation in a constructive way.
Yeah, I mean, I support schools. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what, I think it's tough to get past the conversation of we should stop doing things that the public should do. Right. And I think it's important to start to affirm that there were basic, Councilman Anderson, your way that you framed it, or maybe, I don't know who framed it, but like, there are things we should do. And let's kind of get on the same page about that. Like, we should educate people. And there are people who have been in Scarborough for a while. And there are people that will come to Scarborough at some point and become Scarborough citizens. And 5 years from now, they will be the new incumbents, right? And that matters, right? And we've got this declining population in our schools, and we've got a need to replace our schools and to stop either oring, right? And so, and to not be afraid to solve the housing problem, because we're really afraid of the school problem that we don't want to talk about, right? They're both problems, right? And I think that's maybe part of it. And I think the other thing I'd say is we talk about what we make easy, what we make hard. There's maybe an assumption or implication or something that we're saying to make some things easier, which is one way to approach it. The other way to do it is to make some things harder, right? And if there's things that we don't want, or if there's things that don't value align, there's always a way for government to make things harder, right? And so it's a little bit funny, but it's real, right? And if we want to discourage things, let's try to discourage them. And maybe make some things easier that align with our values and what we need. But also, and for maybe dodging your question a little bit, but we do need schools, and we're going to need schools regardless of whether we build housing for families or housing for 55+ people that are now considered elderly. So I think not solving one problem doesn't make the other problem go away.
Yeah, and I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but I appreciate it. Put the school question on Brian. No, I think that's a helpful way to frame it, and just to put my own position out there, and I've said it before, I believe we do have a fundamental duty and obligation to educate everyone who wants to come to Scarborough and live in Scarborough. And I think too often we hear, and sometimes it's well-intentioned when someone's talking about like a senior project. Oh, this is great. This is a great project, and really won't impact the schools because it's all seniors. It's like, well,
Yeah.
That's good as far as it goes, but I don't think that should be the driving motivation. I also think, and I said this during councilor comments a couple of meetings ago, that some of these problems and challenges we have, they're problems of prosperity. They're good problems to have. And there are a lot of places around Maine and elsewhere that would gladly trade with us and have families who want to move into the community.
Yeah.
And so I agree, we shouldn't look at it as sort of either or, but thanks.
This is helpful for me, because I come and I say, what are we trying to solve for? What is it? And I listened to April and John and Corey all express their kind of perspective on what they value. And I think that helps me, because I share a lot of what they expressed as the values that they want to see advanced as leadership developing policy in the town of Scarborough. And I can deal with that. I think we have to recognize that we have to deal with the hand we've been dealt. And we've been dealt a good hand. We've got the town of Scarborough with all sorts of desirable elements that cause it to be an expensive place to live. And that's not gonna change. We're gonna have, the Seacoast properties are all gonna be 7-figure properties forever more. And so that's not going to be where, if we're saying, gee, and we're also trying to solve for, do we look at this as an affordable housing problem? Do we look at it as a senior affordable housing problem? Two different sets, completely. Or is it a workforce problem, a housing problem? General housing or apartments or condos, or single-family structures. I mean, this is a complex issue for us to deal with, and will take some real effort for us to get our arms around where we're going with this, because this is a good start. It opens our eyes to a lot of the kinds of things you have to then grapple with and trade off and ask the Housing Alliance to study further, Karen to study further, get good input from the county, because we are all part of Cumberland County, and we're kind of saying, are we doing our part? The
Right.
first question tonight was from Karen was, where do we stand?
Right.
And that was the one I had written down too. How are we doing? Is that really the appropriate question to ask? If we're doing better than everybody else, do we take our foot off the gas pedal? I mean, maybe not. I don't think so, because the values that were expressed reflected the values that I share, and how a community is a community of people. So I appreciate this discussion, because it's taken me further along the trail of where we need to go.
And if you don't mind Mike throwing in there, we sometimes forget as elected officials, we get stuck on right here, right now, and this is what we're dealing with right now, that we forget vision. And what's the future gonna look like? Us boomers aren't gonna be here forever. 10 years from now, 15 years from now, there's gonna be a sea change again. So, we as a society wanna look at what's it gonna look like and how are we going to plan for that? And I know you guys have heard me say this for a million years, is I don't know what happened, why kids are such a bad thing. I don't know who people think's gonna pay their social security or put into social security, but this is what I talk about when we should be encouraging diversity, encouraging families, encourage great schools, encourage places where people can age in place successfully. I live in North Scarborough, which I still think half you live in Bend do, but that's another story. But anyway, North Scarborough is full of really older people, older than me people, who are living in houses they've lived in forever. And they're barely eking it by, but they can't afford to sell. They have no place to go to. Their taxes are out of control. And I get that they're concerned about, schools are gonna cost me money, but it's like, in an ideal situation, we would have that variety and diversity of options for folks, so that Scarborough's a great place to live from age 0 to age 100 or more.
A quick follow-up on that is I think that a lot of people think when we're talking about new units or affordable units, they see that as a fix for somebody else outside the community. And I think one of the things that Brian showed us in the data is that a lot of people, even some people at higher income levels, like way more than the median, are struggling to meet this new dynamic of of pricing and utilities and food and all of those things. And I think we don't want to forget that there may be tools that we can use that could help people stay in their existing housing so that we don't have to create new housing for them. I just don't want that group to get left out. And I'll stop.
Well, my question is where you were, kind of where you're going, which is, you know, we've defined our vision, we've identified our gaps, we figured out what we want to do. Just practically, like, what are the levers within the municipality's control? I don't know if anybody can talk to the things that are like the practical things we would do. Is it we're changing our zoning? Is it we're changing the GMO to focus more on certain affordable projects? I heard you kind of say some tax credit ideas maybe that we need to consider
Maybe,
for people. So I'm just curious, like, being practical, like, what are the things within our control, the tools we have that when we figure out what we want, that we would use? And then I also suspect whatever we do, there's still gonna be this state law piece that's gonna maybe become a barrier to truly enable. So it would be great to know what the state barriers are so that we can work with our delegation to advocate, if that's important to Scarborough, to make sure that state law is adapting. Because one of the things I've heard about Maine housing and why we get so much senior affordable, I don't know if this is true, is because the way Maine State Housing does their stuff tends to lean more towards supporting senior projects. And so that's why we see such an influx of senior affordable projects, is because, going back to your point, it's easier than, you know, a non-age restricted or a workforce housing project. So the system isn't.
Yeah.
we're gaming the system for.
Well, yeah, scoring wise, yeah, there's differences in scoring. I mean, frankly, it's also easier when you're coming into Scarborough and proposing a project. It is 1,000 times easier to come to these 2 pages of public meetings and propose a senior project than a family project.
Yeah.
And get all the questions about how are you gonna impact the schools and this and that.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a feedback loop in some way, because one of the reasons, I don't know if Brian agrees, but I think one of the reasons why Maine Housing, a lot of other state agencies end up funding a lot of senior projects is because one of their main criteria, sometimes it's a threshold criteria, is do you have your local approvals? It's a lot easier, generally speaking, to get local approvals for senior than it is for family, for the reason that's true that Brian described.
And there's one other little narrow piece. And it's really is about zoning and the development landscape. So when we first started talking about Firehouse Village, there was one person who came forward and said, well, you know what? We've been experimenting with building market rate affordable housing. So no subsidies, but maybe a little assistance from the town, either in land or other things. And so those were some really excellent discussions. And I'll go back to Tom, that we didn't end up having them do that type of project here, but I think it's worthwhile going back and saying to folks, what does it take for you to build a market rate affordable housing project that doesn't require, you know, a Maine housing grant or other things? And maybe we're just out of that market now, but I think there are some people who really want to experiment with what it takes to build housing that's affordable but not subsidized.
Yeah, there are people out there, I think you can count them on one hand. I mean, more often than not, the private developers are building to a different market, and they're looking to maximize their profit in large part. I don't fault them for that. So it takes a real special developer that's gonna wanna shave their own profit for purposes of kind of advancing something that's important to them.
Yeah, and sort of there's, we talked earlier, right, about there's the affordability component and then kind of who you're serving. And those are the 2 elements of affordable housing. And so if you think about it from practicality, in some markets, the affordable rent kind of gets pretty close to the market rent. So maybe you're not giving up a whole lot economically, but you end up limiting who you can serve and making it a lot harder to rent to people. And so kind of, you know, unless you have to, you know, a developer's kind of not gonna cut their customer base in half or by a third, unless there's something worthwhile, right? So unless there's a big subsidy available, or unless there's a grant or a tax
land,
abatement or land or something. And then I just looked up really quickly, and in the latest QAP, there's no difference in Scarborough between family housing and elderly housing or senior housing, sorry. So I truly think that it's just really hard to get through the public with a family proposal. That's
Just one perhaps final thought, as you think about moving toward articulating policy around this, I heard a lot of conversation around understanding what are the community's values. You will all have them, but it's important to obviously get public feedback. We do have an opportunity with a community survey going out late summer, early fall. And so one of the things we could do is perhaps give some thought to a series of questions that really give us that data around values.
Yeah. One of the things we talked about in the communications committee was doing a Counselor Corner Live on the topic of housing. And I think this gave us some really good questions that we may want to ask the public there as like a precursor to a survey to figure out, you know, what is important and how do we want to shape those questions? Because I agree, I think getting the public feedback on this is super important. Like while I shared what I value, I represent the entire community and we need to have them be part of the process. So however we can get as much insight and feedback. And again, it's not going to be perfect. I don't think like we'll never get consensus on this, but striving to understand and figure out where we need to focus, I think would be helpful. And also I'm really interested in understanding the gaps you guys see in our community where we have weaknesses relative to other communities. And then to Bill's point though, like I think that's the value conversation is where we're strong doesn't mean we slow down. It might be that's where we want to focus. Maybe we don't focus on the weaknesses and the gaps. We say we're really great at senior affordable housing and we really want to keep focusing there. And that's what our community values. And that's what we'll continue to drive from a policy perspective, or we might say, you know what, we're good on senior affordable. We don't feel like we need to focus there. We want to focus on, I don't know, something different that could come out of it. But I'm just super interested to know the gaps and the strengths to then figure out where we want to prioritize and focus as a community.
And you know, if we're looking for public input and polling, we are out there asking for that all the time, whether it's the Housing Alliance people, the senior administration here in the building with us, the town council. I think it's almost as if we should be polling ourselves and saying, okay, where is the consensus on where we're going? What are we trying to solve for? And be respectful of both sides of the equation, because there are always two sides to every argument. But that's where I would start, because I'm not that I'm afraid to get public input. I'm just not sure that it's necessarily going to be what the community feels. I feel like we know better than anyone what the community, because we're always asking. So
I hate to stifle good conversation. I think we could probably go another hour just with random thoughts and questions that pop up, and we love putting our guests on the spot. But for tonight, I'm going to go ahead and try and bring this to a meaningful close for the council, in that I think what I'm hearing, and just in terms of the way our goal is framed and, you know, what we need to do next, I think, is council leadership needs to put our heads together and decide on some next steps and come back to council and propose those next steps. And whether that is another public forum, whether that's a task force like we did similar to when we revised the CEA policy, whether that's or the growth management ordinance, like whatever that looks like, you know, leadership will come up with some ideas and put those out to council to give us some direction on what happens next. John did allude to the fact that the communications committee today did put out the idea of doing a Counselor Corner Live on this in July. And so I think as a soft launch to continue this conversation, I would be in support of moving that initiative forward. And so that will probably be the next stop on this train, but certainly we will put our heads together and communicate with council as to how to move this forward. So I want to thank you all very much for your time this evening and thank you to the residents who joined us. We will go ahead and recess until 7 o'clock for the start of our regular meeting. Good evening and welcome. I will go ahead and start this meeting. This is the regularly scheduled meeting of the Scarborough Town Council. Today is Wednesday, June 4th, 2025. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, and liberty and justice for all.
Jody, could you call the roll, please?
Counselor Doherty,
Here.
Counselor Shu,
Here.
Counselor Fellows,
Here.
Counselor Donovan.
Here.
Counselor Anderson.
Here.
And Counselor Chair Steiner.
Here.
Thank you.
At this time, I will open up the floor to general public comment. If there's anyone wishing to make general public comments this evening on something that is not on our agenda, please take this opportunity to do so. You have 3 minutes. Please state your name for the public record.
It's Allison Bristol, Bayview Avenue. And thank you, first of all, for the workshop we just had. It was a lot of information and a lot to process, kind of hard to comment, a lot of data. The one thing that I'll say, the elephant in the affordable housing room is no one mentioned that if we build affordable housing in Scarborough, it won't necessarily be available to Scarborough residents. I understand that that's the law now in the state. And I've also asked on a couple of occasions, I had a conversation with Ben, forgive me, I can't come up with his last name, from SOPO, about getting an idea of the percentage of people who are residing in Jocelyn Place who moved there from Scarborough and have yet to get an answer. I think this is important. If Scarborough residents are expected to subsidize housing, who gets to live there and who doesn't, and if it's the law, then I think we need to, the public needs to know it won't necessarily be people from Scarborough who get to live there. A couple of things, comments on the meeting. And I'm not against affordable housing. I want to start there. I think it's important to an extent, but I also agree with Councilor Shoup that I think we've done our fair share with the current rate of growth ordinance. And I've emailed this to the council, I think before, that the one that we that was adopted in 2023 allows for 2,055 new growth permits over 9 years, 685 over 3 years times 3. That doesn't include the affordable pool. So we have, in this first cycle, 3-year cycle that ends July of 26, we have Jocelyn Place, we have Uplands 1 and 2 at the Downs, we have Village Commons. That totals 169 units. The 3I project adds another 51, so that brings the total to 220. So in the first 3 years, we've done 32% of the permits that are allowed. So I really do feel like we're doing our fair share. And I have lots more than 3 minutes that I want to speak to, but I want to say, before several incarnations of the growth ordinances, it used to be it was the developer's responsibilities, if they were building a big development, that 10% had to be affordable. And so now you look at something like the Downs, and in this 3-year cycle, they're getting their credit for the 3I project, which they're not building, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's being developed by a nonprofit, and they're still getting the credit enhancement agreement for that piece of land. And we've also given another credit enhancement agreement. So, it's a 90% credit enhancement agreement, and the permits get to be taken out of the affordable pool. So it really costs the Downs nothing. I don't see really what the contribution is, except maybe the land, and I don't know what that, agreement is all about. So I have lots more. I'm out of time. I'll just say one more thing. We keep talking about the option to age in place, and I'm 72 years old and I want to age in place, but aging in place means aging in my home. It doesn't mean aging in Scarborough. And I'll just add one more thing, if I might, that I watched the Housing Alliance meeting that we just approved, or the Alliance approved, $200,000 grant for the new Marshview Terrace and 75% credit enhancement agreement to forward this to council. And that 75 credit enhancement agreement, if I read the information correctly, means that they will be paying 17,000 and change in taxes on that property in year one. That's $3,000 more than I pay. And I pay utilities, I pay insurance. So for an entire building, they'd be paying the same amount of taxes basically as I'm paying to try to stay in my home. So thank you all very much. I appreciate it. And I'll send you more information.
Thank you, Allison.
Richard Hayes, Martin Avenue. I'm here to speak about the new Marshview project. I'm as against it as I was the original version. I don't understand how this thing is moving as quickly. They contend, I attended the Alliance meeting, and I'm confused. A week before that meeting, they published an agenda that said we recommend the two things that Allison just alluded to, the $200,000 payment and the 75% CEA. How do you publish an agenda, publish the outcome of the meeting, and then have a meeting? That's the only reason I went to the meeting. I'm thinking, what's going to happen at the meeting? Well, nothing happened at the meeting. Everyone sit and listen, praise Ben for his presentation. That doesn't smell right to me, but you know, an outcome published ahead of the meeting. In any event, they made some changes to the original proposal at Marshview, but they haven't solved the issues. The big issue is the danger that that project will create on Route 1. A right turn only is a disaster. There is a lot of traffic on Route 1, as I'm sure all of you know. It is not getting lighter. The marsh is still there. Phillips Brook runs behind it. There's wetlands, none of which they can solve. They say they aren't touching the wetlands this time, but they're still there. There's going to be an effect on it. You folks, I believe, recently passed an ordinance that said you're concerned about the safety of Scarborough residents. If you pass that project, that isn't considering the safety of Scarborough residents. That will be multiple accidents waiting to happen. People coming south are not gonna go across Haggis Parkway or the road, Milken Road, I think next to Ann John's, to go over to Payne Road. They're gonna discover when they get down that they aren't supposed to make a left-hand turn and then try to figure out what they're gonna do. They point out great things like there's a there's a grocery store close by that people can walk to. I love the on Vine Market, but if anybody living in that project with low income can afford to do their weekly shopping on the Vine Market, something's happened. They shouldn't be in that project. There are so many issues that you really ought to just, my suggestion is the land trust ought to buy the land. We want 30% of Scarborough reserved by 30. There's 8+ or 8 acres that's where it ought to be. It is not, that project is not for the public benefit. I'm sorry I ran over. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Hello, Anita McKee, 309 Black Point Road. First, very quickly, last Sunday was a very special day and I missed it. So I wanted to tell Counselor Anderson happy birthday. And now also, I just quickly, that was a very interesting workshop. And I look forward to the counselor corner. I think that's a wonderful idea. I just wondered about the 10% that developers are supposed to put into affordable housing, whether that's written in stone and whether that comes from the state. But I think that should be looked at. I think it should be more percentage. And I think that perhaps when developers opt out to put money into a fund, then they should be putting more money into the fund. I think that might help affordable housing. We definitely need it so badly. And I'm thinking, you know, some people, I shouldn't probably say this, but some people might think of, oh, affordable housing. Well, that's not really the people we want to have in our neighborhoods, which is absolutely wrong and not my thinking. But I think maybe a description of what affordable housing is would be helpful because it's really important. And you guys are great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nina. I have a few more in the room, Matthew, and then I'll come to you online.
Hi, I'm Judy Fisher and I live at Piper Shores. And I was very interested in the workshop because I grew up in housing projects in New York City. And one of the things, a couple of things I'd like to mention. One is that you really have to look at the infrastructure, that if you're going to put affordable housing in places where there's no decent transportation and no access to shopping, then you're just warehousing people. So you need to look at what the infrastructure will be for those areas. Another thing is that having lived in Suffolk County, New York, and worked in Suffolk County, New York, there's usually tremendous opposition to affordable housing. And I think Nina is absolutely right. You have to educate people onto what affordable housing is, how their children will be able to afford it. And finally, I had another question. I understand why communities want senior developments. The question I have is, has anybody calculated how much a house would have to cost in terms of the taxes that the owners would pay, property taxes, where the crossover point is between the cost of the house, the taxes, and the services that are required, say, for a family of 4, school district houses, transportation, school buses, all those things. What is the point at which new residents are not a burden on the tax base? And I think you'll find that it's fairly high. But those are the points I wanted to make. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hi, Marvin Gates, 423 Black Point Road. Former fellow New Yorker I am. I lost track of how many years, 30 altogether, 20 plus of those I lived in rent stabilized housing, subsidized housing by the town. Couldn't have afforded to live in Manhattan, practicing artist, couldn't have been that without those kinds of things. I'm not opposed to subsidized housing. I am opposed to what's currently being considered at Marshview Terrace for a variety of reasons that have been touched upon. And I'm going to repeat something that was touched upon. And very interesting conversation at the at the Housing Alliance meeting. I was online listening to it the last time. Very informative workshop today. Had a hard time consuming all that data and keeping my eyes open, frankly, but that's just me. Not for lack of interest in it, but just overwhelming. So thank you for that. Here's why I'm opposed to Marshview Terrace, very specifically. They're asking Scarborough residents, the Housing Alliance approved the CEA recommendation to you, And there is absolutely no way that they can demonstrate that Scarborough residents will benefit from it. That it's illegal to do that. And I'd like you to ask yourselves, why are you asking, why are you asking me to subsidize something that people in Scarborough are not going to benefit from? Great people in the state will benefit from it. Great people in the county will benefit from it. Ask the county, ask the state. Mr. Anderson, you were talking about what kinds of laws do you need to approach your state representatives that you know. This is one of them. This thing should be dead on arrival. You can't ask us to pay for something that Scarborough won't benefit from and that there's no legal guarantee that it will benefit from. It's wrong. Thank you.
Thank you, Marvin. Matthew, whenever you're ready.
Thank you. My name is Matthew Keith, and I am a resident at 8 Pleasant Ave. And first, and very importantly, I did not know that it is Councillor Anderson's belated birthday. So happy birthday to Councillor Anderson. Yeah. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to watch the council workshop today. I was busy, but I'm definitely looking forward to watching it back and really appreciate this conversation being put front and center. Looking forward to the councilor corners around it. And it's really important. And I think one of the things that I wanted to name is I'm really concerned with some of the public comments that I've heard most recently around Marshview, but sort of that come up often around the sort of like not in my backyard. A lot of it is like the sort of like quote those types of people kind of things. And I can really understand and have empathy for a lot of the frustrations, especially I come from Hawaii and saw Hawaii, blow up and get overdeveloped. And it's part of the reason I don't live there anymore, other than my partner and her family here, is it became too expensive. Lots of people from Hawaii had to move away. So I have empathy, but I just hope that we can all be mindful as we learn and engage more of the types of stereotypes that we're playing into, and just really trying to understand and have empathy for all people, even if they don't live in Scarborough yet, because once they move here, they are Scarborough residents as well. And so when we're finding the balance of engaging to come into this conversation, and I really hope as many community members as possible, and especially those with concerns, will engage, that we can do it thoughtfully and that we can have respect and empathy in that process. Because housing is truly unaffordable. My partner, when she bought the home we live in, the only reason that we were able to do it is because of a massive amount of money that she saved up for a down payment. Just 4 or 5 years ago, the house would have been like half the cost. And we sort of missed that low interest, fairly low compared to where we are now price range. And it took over a year for us to find a house to buy, and renting was just as expensive. And I think we all know how challenging that is, but there's certainly a need for affordable housing for people who already live in Scarborough, as well as people who would be great members of our community. And so I just wanted to name that. I certainly look forward to continuing to engage in this conversation and talk with those who have different views than me, learn from them, share those conversations. Just once again, I'd like to encourage us all to do it as constructively, positively, and respectfully as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. Anyone else wishing to make general public comment? Seeing none, I will close general public comment. Item 5 on our agenda this evening is the minutes from the May 21st, 2025 Town Council meeting. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Corey, you're back.
Second.
Any council discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Right, thank you. Sure, that is unanimous. Item 6 is adjustments to the agenda. I do not have any adjustments this evening. Item 7 is items to be signed treasurer's warrants. I took care of those prior to the meeting. And item 8 is the town manager's report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I see the speaker just left the room, but I did want to speak just very briefly to one of the comments made earlier, reference to the Housing Alliance meeting last week. What occurred in that meeting is no different than what occurs at the council meetings. A potential motion is simply printed on the agenda for the council, for the committee in that case to consider. Whether they pass it or not is certainly, is their prerogative. So there was certainly nothing done in advance. It's no different than how the council conducts its business. And I think frankly, it's better practice so the public has an appreciation that there is an item that will come up and be considered for action that evening. So just wanted to be clear in what occurred there. I do have a couple of updates on some of the major construction projects. The Black Point Road reconstruction project, very pleased to say, is 100% complete. I believe the road closures are still in place simply to allow the contractor to remove all of their equipment. I see Councilor Doherty shaking his head no, but the lingering reason that the signs were left up was to allow the contractor to remove all of the heavy equipment. So very pleased with Shaw Brothers. The quality and certainly the speed with which they did the work is just remarkable. Keep in mind, we had an aggressive substantial completion date of June 13th, which obviously they've met and exceeded by completing the job 100%. So very, very pleased. We also are dealing with a kind of an evolving situation on Scotty Hill Road. This is very close to Flaherty's Farm. If you can picture it, and forgive me, I don't know the name of it may not be a named stream, but there's moving water actually underneath the retail component of Flaherty's Farm. And obviously it makes its way under Scotty Hill Road, ultimately to the marsh. There are 4 corrugated metal culverts that have degraded over time, so much so the bottoms have actually kind of rotted out of them, and it causes the road to obviously settle on top. So we're at the point of working with our consulting engineers to understand what that fix is and what the costs are likely to be. It's likely to be an expensive fix for certain. There's a number of different design options and therefore cost options as well. So as soon as we know more of that, I'll certainly share that with you. But at this point, the road is closed, local traffic only. Emergency vehicles can get around should they need, but they are certainly able to respond from different directions. So we'll keep you posted there. With respect to the election, just a reminder in the back of the room, tomorrow is the last day of open absentee voting. And then until, help me out, Tony, June 9th is for special exception purposes. Things have picked up considerably over the last several days. At this point, as of 4 o'clock this afternoon, 997 absentee ballots have been issued, 686 of which have been returned. Still fairly low, but picking up compared to where we've been for the first couple of weeks. And just a reminder, the general election is June 10th at the high school, 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. The Eastern Trail Close the Gap project, we're still working. All the contracts have been signed, bonds are have been secured. There's a bunch of work going on behind the scenes in terms of submittals. This is details for the engineers to work through, and we're still searching for a date for a pre-construction meeting. So the project again is moving forward. Very pleased with that progress so far. Marshview project, that's a project that's garnered a fair amount of interest, has come back to us. They were able to turn that project around fairly quickly. They shrunk it considerably. It is now a 50-unit single building, focusing on 55 plus, certainly income restricted as well. This project is being proposed as right, if you will, meaning that they do not need any special zoning considerations whatsoever. They are requesting a credit enhancement agreement in the interest of time and the process that we have under our CEA policy. This matter was taken up by the Housing Alliance at their meeting last week. There was a positive recommendation for both grant support and CEA. This is just the start of the CEA evaluation process. We do have the matter appearing on the Finance Committee agenda next Thursday as well, really to to start that conversation. And the finance committee will also be considering the creation of a TIF district, which is required as a prerequisite. And lastly, they will be heard at the planning board on June 16th. A number of the concerns that have been raised this evening regarding traffic and the like certainly will be points of major discussion before the planning board. With respect to the school building committee, I was not able to attend their meeting this past Monday night. It does appear, as the committee is informed more and more each week, frankly, particularly around cost, that the cost is likely to make the decision. And my prediction at this point, I'm kind of standing down on pursuing other land. I think cost is going to drive the conversation to really require us effectively to rebuild on current sites. But I don't want to get ahead of the committee, but just in terms of site selection, at this point, I'm kind of standing down, waiting for the committee to make that decision, but that appears to be the direction things are heading. Short-term rentals, there was a workshop several weeks back. We are accepting public comments until July 1st, and the matter has been scheduled to be heard at the ordinance committee on July 9th at this point. And just a number of personnel updates in my absence last week. Liam took over preparing this, and as a fine HR professional, had to add a new installment of personnel updates. We have a number of 2 police officers who've graduated from the Criminal Justice Academy. Very pleased to have them back and in our service. We have several new firefighters, 3 at this point. Some some promotions in the fire department as well. And then very pleased that there'll be a legislative sentiment for Lieutenant Shannon Haley, who passed away. Very pleased that Senator Brunner and Carney have chosen to take that forward. I'll also mention, just under the heading of personnel, the fire department does a terrific job, as does the police department, to kind of recognize their accomplishments internally. And the fire department held its annual awards banquet this past Saturday at Bailey's Campground. On that part of that agenda, there were certainly any number of citations. I should mention that all of this is kind of done from the staff level. It's not done from leadership. So they recognize themselves in terms of what's noteworthy. Also, individual awards were handed out, as were years of service. And it's just worth noting, we've got 2 individuals with receiving the Henry Gould Award, which is 45 years of service to the fire department. Really remarkable service over their lifetimes, frankly. So with that, I'm available for questions.
Thank you, Tom. Are there questions? Yes, Councilor Doherty.
Yeah, on the, mention the Marsh View, it doesn't have to come back to us. It was a 4-story build in the original plan, and it's not now.
All I know is they're not exceeding any of the height requirements. So forgive me, I'm not sure if it's 4 or not, but it does not exceed the height.
Yeah, because I think the height is, I don't think you can't have a 4-story, can you, in town? No. So anyway, because that's the reason they had to come to us, I think, was the height. And what was the other reason?
They were requesting a contract zone change.
Yeah, there were 4 or 5 different areas of zoning relief that they were seeking. Height being one of them, setback. There's 3 different zones on that property.
The other thing that they'd have to come before us for is if the taxpayer is going to subsidize it, right?
Correct. That will certainly.
That
It's
will
not
come
going to get subsidized now?
It has to come to us before that decision is made.
Oh, okay. So it's not a done deal. If the planning board does this, they still may be coming before us.
Yeah, at this point, they've asked for a credit enhancement agreement, and that is the decision of this council. We've got a fairly elaborate process with multiple committees, and we're starting that process now. But ultimately, that will reach this council.
Okay.
But unlike the prior proposals, there's no request for additional zoning assistance. So
Which means that, I don't mean to interrupt,
Please.
which means that the project is running on 2 parallel tracks right now. One track is going to the planning board, and those decisions, as long as they are in compliance with our current zoning, do not come back to council for anything. the other track is this CEA request. And so for their application and the likelihood of that project getting funded, they are going to come to us to ask for a CEA, but that doesn't have anything to do with the building portion of it, and that all will be at planning board.
That is a great clarification for the public. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Other questions for Tom? Okay, item 9 is standing and special committee reports and liaison reports. I will start down on this side tonight.
We had a communications meeting. I think you can probably address that better than I can, so I'm gonna let you do it.
Sure.
And have a committees Tuesday.
Excellent, thank you. Karen?
Sure. I don't know if I have much updates. I think all of my committees are still kind of working on the same things. Community services are working on program gaps and different age groups that we don't have programs for. The Conservation Commission just went through a tree ordinance, which is required to become a tree city. So maybe we'll be seeing that at ordinance soon. The Parks and Conservation Land Board is still working on their checklist for folks when they apply for the land bond applications. Next week, we do have the ordinance committee. I'm not sure if anyone heard, but the animal control ordinance is coming before us. I appreciate everyone's patience while we receive multiple emails, and I just asked you to hang tight to see kind of how ordinance handles that. We also do have before ordinance a request in Running Hill to allow landscaping. I attended the GPCOG event. Did you want me to update that now or a content? All right, thanks.
Thank you, Karen. I will go ahead and go. I'm serving all kinds of different roles that I don't normally serve in the absence of one of our counselors. And so I did chair the Communications Committee meeting today, which is a familiar seat. I sat there for a long time. And we discussed more recommendations from staff and the work that staff has been doing to advance any kind of direct print media that we can get to our residents. Allison and Liam have worked to determine whether or not it's reasonable to send mailers, whether or not it's reasonable to issue our own print newsletter. They are exploring different avenues for submitting written pieces to other towns' current print publications, which are also not directly mailed, they're for pickup, but really kind of just trying to look at every avenue available to us right now to try and get some print media available for our residents. And so that is an ongoing project for our staff and for our committee to just kind of weigh in and see where we are in terms of reaching those residents that were really dependent on the leader. The other thing that we talked about today was the community survey. I literally cannot believe it's almost time to issue our biannual 2-year community survey, our statistically valid survey that we've issued twice in the past. So this will be our 3rd iteration. The Communications Committee is soliciting input from the council in terms of what question, just a review of what we have submitted the last 2 years to get your feedback, if any, on which questions you think we should take off or which ones need maybe tweaking or adding. And that work is going to be going on throughout the summer, both at the July meeting and then with a final recommendation being in August, so that the survey can go out early September and we can have data in time for the sitting council in 2025 before the new year, so that they will have that information and data as they go into their goal setting process. And then the other thing that we talked about at comms today was hosting another Counselor Corner Live. John and I are more than happy with Scott to host Counselor Corner Live on the topic of housing. And so we tentatively have that scheduled for Tuesday, July 15th at 6 p.m. And Liam told me not to say that it's at the Public Safety Building, but you know, that's the goal. And so be on the lookout for an update on location, but Tuesday, the 15th at 6 p.m. In terms of an SBAC update, the School Building Advisory Committee, Monday night was another night of revelations and refinements for the committee. Every single week, we feel like we're getting more information. We're able to drill down on the numbers even further. We're getting new information about the sites that we had been reviewing. And so at this point, The committee, a lot of what we talked about was in executive session because a lot of the decisions that we're making right now are tied very directly to our site availability and selection process. And so we worked out a way so that we could talk about it more broadly on Monday and in a public setting. And so I look forward to that conversation. And I think Tom is accurate in saying that price, I think at this point is going to be one of the biggest drivers, if not the biggest driver in terms of what our options really are and what we are going to be able to offer this community in terms of a solution. And with that, I will turn it to Corey.
Thank you. Rules and policy has not met recently. Long-range planning met on May 9th and discussed, had sort of a review of the status of comp plan elements. Their next meeting is Friday the 13th at 8 a.m. and they are going to be looking at reviewing some of the elements of the TDC zoning districts. The planning board met on May 19th. Among sort of the highlights there, they conditionally approved the Market Basket project in the Downs, along with retail and mixed use, a couple of different retail and mixed use buildings in the Downs also conditionally approved. And as was noted earlier, at their next meeting on June 16th, among other things, they will be considering the revised Marshview project. That's it.
Thank you. Yep, Bill?
The Scarborough Housing Alliance, as was mentioned earlier, there is a new proposal from South Portland Housing Authority. It is just senior affordable housing. The numbers as a result of this rather significant reduction, caused the number of vehicle trips in and out to be dramatically reduced. And that was my biggest concern with the project, that it was going to be problematic and a safety issue. I feel as if this is a big step forward and that there are ways in which traffic enforcement can occur. I see it all the time on Black Point Road. And it's why people don't speed on Black Point Road, because there is traffic enforcement. And so I feel differently about the project now than I did previously. School Board Advisory Committee, April and I sit on this together. And we've been doing this, it seems like forever. It's been a long process, but it's a hugely important matter for the community. June is really decision time based on the schedule which we have set out. We have all the same issues that we have to deal with, which are which option do we go with? There's several, and then variations off those. Which site is selected? And which option will influence which site and what cost. Tom's comment earlier, as April also said, was that's insightful of where this thing needs to go, because we need to not trim around the edges of costs. We need to get a substantial reduction to get a better assurance that the public will pass at referendum a solution that is essential. We really need, this is the biggest capital issue that the town has and will have, and we need to solve it. So the committee is working on all of that. And I think that's it.
Thank you. John?
I don't have anything.
Do you want to announce the Finance Committee meeting next
The
Thursday?
Finance Committee meets next Thursday, and we are going to be joined by a special guest.
Ugh.
Council April Scyther is going to be joining us as the third member while the vacancy is there, and we're talking about TIFs and the CA project.
Perfect, thank you. The one thing I forgot to mention as it relates to the School Building Advisory Committee is that they are poised to present their final recommendation to the school board on Thursday, June 26th. And so council is invited to attend. Again, we are not the decision-making bodies on their recommendation, but they certainly will value us being there and being a part of that conversation if you're available. Moving on to the rest of our agenda this evening. The first item is Proclamation 25-004, act on the request of Proclamation 25-004 in recognition of the 250th anniversary of the first naval battle of the American Revolution in Machias, Maine on June 12th, 1775 rather. This came to me from a resident who clearly is a history buff and also a former resident of Machias. That's where he is from. He took great pride in explaining to me the historical importance of the fact that Machias was settled by Scarborough residents, and why our two communities are now linked forever in this important historical battle. And so he brought forward this resolution to me, and I said that it would be my honor to sponsor it this evening. So I will go ahead and read the proclamation. Mr. Whitney, I'm so sorry that you're not here. I know that you were really excited for me to do this. And so without further ado, Proclamation 25-004 in recognition of the 250th anniversary of the first naval battle of the American Revolution in Machias, Maine on June 12, 1775. Be it resolved by the Council of the Town of Scarborough, Maine, in Town Council assembled, that whereas in 1762, due to a scarcity of hay arising from fires and droughts, Isaiah Foster, Isaac Larrabee, and others from Scarborough visited a place in search of grass, finding a great opportunity of it in the marshes and an opportunity for sawmills on the river there, in what later was settled as Machias. And whereas 80 persons, of whom no less than 54 were from Scarborough, petitioned the General Court for a grant of this vicinity settlement, which was allowed in 1770. And whereas the first naval battle of the American Revolution was the Battle of Machias, this battle, which occurred after townspeople refused to provide the British with lumber for barracks, led to the capture of the armed schooner HMS Margarita by settlers under Captain Jeremiah O'Brien and Captain Benjamin Foster, who were originally from Scarborough. And now, therefore, be it resolved that when the town of Scarborough, that the town of Scarborough does hereby honor the courageous actions of the residents of Scarborough and Machias, whose collective efforts at the Battle of the Margarita exemplify the spirit of unity and resistance that ignited the flame of liberty in our nation. Their shared commitment to freedom and self-governance serves as a lasting legacy, reminding us of the enduring bond between our communities and the sacrifices made for the cause of independence. Be it further resolved that the citizens of Scarborough are encouraged to reflect upon this pivotal moment in history and to participate in commemorative events marking the 250th anniversary of the Battle of the Margarita, thereby honoring our shared heritage and enduring spirit of our forebearers. Signed and dated this 4th day of June, 2025, on behalf of the Town Council and the Town Manager of Scarborough, Maine. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Any council discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Oh, yes, Councilor Donovan.
I particularly appreciate colonial history. I grew up in Concord, Massachusetts, so that on April 19th, 1775, this all began. And hopefully it will last for a lot longer.
Thank you. Yes, Scott.
Yeah, it's just, I'm so glad he brought this forward. I had no idea that that was the case. I mean, my parents moved down east and went to Machias to, restaurant there. It's escaping me now, but everybody knows it. But anyway, it's amazing. I didn't know that.
I didn't know it either.
Yeah, that's a great thing. Yeah, thank you very much.
Yes, so thank you again to Mr. Whitney for bringing this forward. And I know that he was very excited. He was going to be returning home. And so he can come to Town Hall and pick up his official signed copy to take it home with him. All those in favor? Show that is unanimous. Thank you. Order number 25-057 is 7 PM public hearing and action on the new request for a food handler's license from Blake Orchard LLC located at 2 Stewart Drive.
Yes, this is a new application and first-time applications have to come before the town council for approval. The application has been vetted and it's recommended by the town clerk's office that this be approved.
Thank you. Is there anyone wishing to make public comment on this item? Seeing none, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any council discussion? All those in favor? Show that as unanimous. Thank you. Order number 25-058 is a 7 PM public hearing and action on the new request for a special amusement permit from Daniel Mays doing business as Frith Farm LLC located at 61 Ashwamp Road.
Again, this is a first-time application, but annually these do come before the council. His is on Saturday, I believe it's one Saturday a month, and it's going to be in the clerk's office.
Thank you. Is there anyone wishing to make public comment on this item? Seeing none, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any council discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Show that as unanimous. Thank you. Order number 25-059 is a 7 PM public hearing and action on the new request for a food handler's license and a new liquor license from Key Point Properties LLC doing business as Spanish Point located at 3 East Grand Avenue.
Again, this is a new application. The applicant is present. If there are any questions from the council and the clerk's office, the application has been vetted and the clerk's office recommends approval.
Thank you. Is there anyone wishing to make public comment? Seeing none, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any council discussion? John?
I just want to thank the applicants for coming. It's always great when you guys take the time to come when these things come forward. So thank you for being here.
Thank you. Good luck with it.
With that, oh, yes, Scott?
I just have one question about it. What is it? I mean, it's amusement. What kind of amusement?
No, this is food.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm reading the wrong one. Okay.
Yep, that's okay.
Uh,
This is going in where Garage Barbecue used to be. Yeah, yeah. Any other council discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Show that as unanimous. Thank you. Good luck. Old business, we have no old business at this time. New business, we have no new business at this time. Item 10 is non-action items. I have none. Item 11 is council member comments. Counselor Anderson.
So I didn't want April to beat the record that I set when we finished our meeting. So I do have a 15-minute speech prepared. No, I don't.
3 minutes, sir.
I can only get 3 minutes. That's not a rule. No, I just want to put out there for the record that I know ordinance is meeting next week to talk animal control. And I just want to say, I won't be disappointed if it doesn't make it past ordinance and come to the council. So take that into consideration as you guys do your deliberation next week.
Thank you, Counselor Anderson. Counselor Shu.
So last week I had the opportunity to represent Scarborough at the GPCOG Annual Summit, which I had actually never attended before. And Scarborough had the opportunity to participate. They have one panel that does it every year. And so the panel this year was the discussion between, it was me and Jamie Fitch, and the Cape Elizabeth Town Planner and a Cape Elizabeth Town Councilor. And we discussed the closure of Sawyer Road, right? Street. Let's get it right. So it was a great hour discussion where we answered questions, you know, the different decisions you're making and how you come to that decision. I think one of the questions from the public was, how do other people do this? Like, no one's done this before, really. And I think that was great because one of the comments was, I'm proud of Scarborough to be leaders. And so it was a great opportunity. Jamie did a great job presenting at the 60 Seconds of What Works, where she presented the artwork that we did to track our 30 by 30. And then I also just wanted to mention, I don't think people realize that Allison Carey was actually a finalist for Best Newsletter. She did not win, but I just wanted to give a shout out to Allison because she was in the top 3. And they commented, the feedback they got was they really loved her pictures of all the local pictures and things like that. So I just wanted to give her a shout out for that as well. And then also just in regards to the ordinance committee meeting last week, I would encourage everyone to just hang tight and also look at what the ordinance changes are. I know people are really upset about changes to the beaches, but we're actually trying to also make changes that are universal throughout towns around us, specifically in regards to schools and tennis courts and baseball fields. So we've heard a lot of people saying, you know, I don't support this, I don't support this. I ask everyone to just please actually look at what the changes are before they blanketly just say they don't support it. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. Other council comment? Yep, Bill?
I shouldn't let it pass that our chair, April Scyther, again stepped up with the finance committee spot.
It's you.
Yes, yeah. And I think that should be recognized. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Scott?
Yeah, Helen's Restaurant.
There it is.
It came to me. Thank you.
So the only thing that I will add to the ordinance discussion and as it relates to the animal control ordinance is if you have emailed the full council, we all do get all of those emails. I typically respond to every email I get. I'm the chair. I feel like that's part of my job. And I have not responded to many of those other than to say thank you for your email. And part of that is in deference to the ordinance committee doing their work. And so if you're watching and you're feeling like the council's not listening or we're not all responding, I think we're all kind of in this waiting place to just see how the ordinance committee level plays out before and if at all it rises to the level of the full council. But we always appreciate your emails and your engagement. Yes.
Yes, in a similar vein related to emails that we've been getting. And this was helpfully clarified following during the town manager's report, but I just wanted to reiterate it as it relates to Marshview, that the council is no longer the arbiter of whether that project moves forward, at least in terms of permitting. And they're no longer requesting a contract zone. What they're proposing is quote unquote, as of right. As was further clarified, they are requesting a CEA, and that was something that will come through the council ultimately. But just for those who have been writing about that, I just wanted to amplify that or reiterate that again, to the risk of being redundant. I will say, just as a sort of a final comment and sort of looping back to what I thought was a really constructive, productive housing workshop that we had prior to our meeting tonight. And one of the recurring themes was about sort of values and what we value as a community. And certainly when Marshview, the revised Marshview project goes in front of the planning board, traffic movement is going to be, that's the big issue, the biggest issue I would venture. And that's not in my court, but I would just say that, again, for benefit of the public, that I think it's helpful to just think about what the things that we sort of already live with and tolerate in town. There was a flea market that operated there for many years. I don't know if anyone here ever got an email about cars pulling out of there. I've yet to get an email from anyone complaining about some of the insane movements that I see from the going in and out of the ice cream shop at the corner of Dunstan Corner, which is one of the most dysfunctional intersections around, particularly as we get into this time of the year. See some really creative driving there. I haven't received any complaints about it. Maybe if they came in front of us now wanting to have that use, it would be different. But again, I put that out there, and I'm not casting aspersions on anyone's opinions, but it just has really struck me driving around town, particularly as we start to evolve into the summer season, that there are a lot of things that happen along Route 1 and elsewhere. And I think my personal opinion is that project is now moving back, has been scaled down to a point where it's more commensurate with sort of an equivalent retail use that could be there and in fact has been there. So that's up to the planning board, and the CEA is a completely different question that we'll consider as a group when the time comes, but I just wanted to put that out there. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other council comment this evening? Seeing none, do I have a motion to adjourn?
To move.
Second.
All those in favor? Thank you very much.